teachers have an enormous effect on mental health. And although some of them say mental health isn't their responsibility, it goes with the job. They can't help it. And good teachers make an enormous impact on mental health, which is why so many people can talk about teachers who've changed their lives, because they are outside the family the main people who will determine the mental health of young people.
We'll offer some pointers which may help to identify some of the more common mental health conditions, and offer advice on what to do if you feel a pupil in your class may be affected.
Teachers do have an immense responsibility for spotting when something's not right with a young person. I'm acutely aware that teachers have a day packed with trying to manage large numbers of children, and if they're able to spot that one child isn't communicating as readily as they have been doing on previous days, that's an immense skill to start with. By doing the job, you are responsible for their mental health. There's no way out. If you don't want to be responsible for children's mental health, don't be a teacher.
So what are the warning signs? What follows are the experiences of a long-serving SENCO and a senior teacher.
They would be very lethargic. They would be lolling, they would be falling asleep, the stomach would be rumbling, they would start losing weight, they would be continually asking to go to the toilet because they would want to be making themselves sick. The eating disorder that brings most to me is the child that has the beautiful packed lunch from home and bings it on the way to school. They get to school and you say, oh, have you got anything to... I've eaten it on the way to school, I'm really, really sorry. You know, I said, what you've eaten? So they reel off the packed lunch and they start really hungry. I had no breakfast, so I've eaten it on the way to school. The way I tend to pick that up is you can usually pick it up if anyone's eating in the room, the child sort of has this withdrawn look because they're not eating and the stomach is rumbling. And usually if you're in a classroom and it's quite, you can hear it. You know, and you're thinking, well, she's just told me she's eating a big lunch. You ring up the parent says, no, she's had a marvellous big packed lunch and she's eaten it all. And what does she eat when she gets home? Well, nothing really, because she's eating this big packed lunch in the morning. She doesn't eat anything when she gets home. But of course, she's not eating at all. And the only way you notice is because the face starts sinking in and the weight starts coming off.
And in teenagers, the most obvious eating disorder is going to be anorexia, and that's because you can see the young people shrink as their devotion to their lessons increases. And again, that's a disorder that does need management. It won't just go away. And perhaps that is the situation where the teacher has to say to the young person and their parents, we're very worried about your weight loss. Do you want to go and see your doctor about it?
So often friends will identify that there's an issue and they may just want some support. They would like to help their friend and they don't know what to do. So sometimes you can actually support the friends and therefore support the person as well. It could be that you could refer the child to the school nurse, who could then, if necessary, obviously involve other support agencies as well. And it's about being supportive. If the child is off, making sure that you check where she is, generally is a she, and so that you know that they're not going to be able to sort of slip under the radar.
I don't tend to link depression with crying. If there's a dramatic change in behaviour, then I would try and look at the background, see what's happening at home. If I'm in the classroom and something happens and the child is either fidgety or unhappy or not speaking properly, not saying the things you expect him to say, I would just keep my eye on him. The work can drop off dramatically, so can the attendance. Because if they get that depressed, then they won't come to school, or they'll come to school and they'll twag lessons. And then you get a spiralling effect. Because they've missed one lesson, they won't go into the next one because they're so far behind, and it'll go on and on and on. So in the end, the grades start slipping, and then they don't come to school at all. The worst scenario I had in depression was actually a kid in care. who was sitting his exams, GCSE, was expected to get A to C's, and all of a sudden it went off the rail, and he'd got himself so depressed was because actually at the age of 16 you come out of care. And nobody had realised that. And where am I going to live? And who's going to look after me? You know, GCSEs, who wants GCSEs? I've nowhere to live. And he got himself very, very depressed. But he was very fidgety, and you spoke to him, very always looking around. And I thought to myself, he's very depressed because everybody expected him to sit solemnly in the corner because he was depressed. But not necessarily so, because he just needed to find out facts. He needed to know what was going on in his life. The placement of his foster home was breaking down because he was so depressed, because he'd go home from school and he'd sit in his bedroom and he wouldn't do his coursework and he would just cry and cry and cry.
So if I saw somebody who was having difficulty like that and perhaps needed extra help, then I would speak to somebody, it might be their head of year or their senior pastoral, who would probably have more background to that situation. Or if it was the first time that anybody had brought the issue up, then they would generally go and check with other staff to see if there was an issue, or just chat to the kid, and perhaps they just didn't like geography. But you can live with that, but it might be something obviously a lot more serious.
I think anxiety again is a very flitchy person, is a very low self-esteem. They don't think they can do it, they don't necessarily want to do it, and somebody's told them they can't do it anyway. So they get very anxious, very nervous.
Anxiety is something we all have different levels of at different times in our lives. And school, yes, there is pressure to do well in exams. There are peer pressures, so you get anxieties about not functioning well enough academically, not pleasing your peers. And unless you're able to deal with that anxiety, then it's going to become a more chronic condition. If a child appears anxious for a period of time, it's about understanding what it's about, and then is there anything you can do, either yourself as the teacher or with your support network, to help the child deal with those anxiety-provoking situations.
I think you've got to be very open to the fact that as a teacher you cannot solve society's problems, and that there are a lot of professionals out there and a lot of voluntary organisations out there who want to and have got the expertise to help children to overcome various different issues that they might have, and it might be a whole family issue. So again, there are organisations and services to support them. And I don't think you should ever think, I can solve this myself, because you won't. You haven't got time and you haven't got the expertise. And neither should you think, oh, because I can't do anything, I'll just sweep it under the carpet and pretend it doesn't exist. Just share things. I mean, that's why there are so many different services and support agencies, because not one single entity can solve all the problems.
Long sleeved, polo neck, warm day, socks, shoes, long trousers, polo neck thing, cardigan buttoned up, and it's a really hot day. And you will say to them, oh, it's boiling in here, are you going to take your cardigan off? No, I'm fine. No, sweat rolling down, you think, well, no, you're not fine. So I would just say, yeah, that's fine, you know, but you look very hot to me. And then I would make a mental note of who it was, and then I would keep my eye open on that particular child. I've come across quite a few cases. I've come across one particular case where it had gone undetected for quite a long while. The student was just seen as very violent. They would trash the classroom. And it was only at one particular moment when I was talking to them that I actually leant over to say something, and they flinched. And I was like, oh, are you okay? Yeah, there's nothing wrong with me. And I carried on talking to them slowly but surely. As I went across again, I said, are you all right? Are you feeling ill? No. And it was, you can't change your face, because if you react, they will just... And in the end, it came to light that he was an abused child, and his answer was, if I abuse myself first, that'll hurt me far more than what he will hurt me. So he abused himself, and it was horrendous. His arms was horrendous. He did get sorted out. We brought in all sorts of outside agencies. We brought the drugs in, social services. He now is on an apprenticeship. He does wear long sleeve shirts, but he says as he gets older, he won't be embarrassed about it, but he said he makes sure his children will never go through that.
I remember a situation many years ago. We had a girl who she wrote on her arms and everything quite a lot to begin with, and then it was like cutting them as they do. And it was just trying to work with her, trying to sort of talk to her. She wasn't very good at engaging with anybody. And I just remember she just laughed at everything. But it wasn't a normal, in inverted commas, laugh. It was a bit manic. She certainly had very bizarre behaviour and was exhibiting that. And so when you sort of had a staff meeting or you just talked to other staff and they'd say, oh yes, so-and-so is behaving really strangely, then we realised that, well, it was all over the place. And that was when sort of child protection was brought in, and then other steps were put in place there too. It went on for quite a long time really, and I suppose it's quite draining in a way, and you just have to hope that time will eventually help her to, in this case, perhaps break away from the situation she was in as she grew up, and she'd have a better opportunity. I mean, I think you just have to be really positive, and just think that, well, life can get better, and if you're as positive as you can, then hopefully those children will see that and work towards that as a goal.
What they need is the support of their teacher. Now, I appreciate if someone's being disruptive in class, that isn't always possible. But I think they should still perhaps remember that they're probably one of the most important people in their children's lives, and are a lot more influential perhaps than they think they are. One of the crucial aspects of the support is the kid knowing that the teacher's still with them, and the teacher may feel inadequate to the task, but there are people in school who they can talk these things over with and work out how they're going to support the child. Whatever the kid tells them, it's not to be shocked by it and not to think, oh, I'm frightened to death by this, I must refer it on. It's to say, outside child protection, whereas if the child is at risk, there are clear procedures to go through, then they must talk to someone about what the child's saying to them, and think about how they can put a support system around the child which is going to be most helpful to the child. Referring them to an agency which the child and their family don't know may not be the best thing to do. Quite a number of support professionals in schools. There's the SENCO, who would be the first port of call, but there will presumably be an educational psychologist allocated to the school, and in certain places like we have in York, there'll be a primary mental health worker who you could talk things over with to decide on the best support for the child.